Since childhood, I have always had a fascination for porcelain dolls. There was something about the delicacy of their faces, the intricately embroidered dresses that captivated me. So, on the day I came across a garage sale in an old house, my heart skipped a beat when I saw a box full of those dolls. The house was strange, with dusty windows and peeling walls, but my curiosity was stronger than the discomfort that scene gave me. The dolls were piled haphazardly in an old, worn-out box, some broken, others intact, but all with glassy eyes that seemed to follow me wherever I went. When I asked the owner of the sale about the dolls, he hesitated before answering, as if weighing each word. He said they were part of an old collection, and that he just wanted to get rid of them. I didn't notice, but a look of relief crossed the man's face when I agreed to pay for them. He even refused my change, which should have been a red flag. But I was so excited about the idea of restoring those dolls, bringing back their forgotten beauty, that I ignored the man's strange behavior. When I got home, I put the box in the guest room. I remember the sound of the glass dolls bumping against each other, a hollow, unsettling noise that echoed through the empty house. I felt a chill go down my spine, as if someone had blown on my neck. I brushed off the feeling as just fatigue and the gloomy weather of that day. I went to have dinner, trying to forget the dolls and focus on other things. But for some reason, it was impossible to get them out of my mind. It felt like those glassy eyes were still watching me, even from another room. That night, I woke up exactly at 3 in the morning. There was a strange chill in the air, one that seemed to seep right into my bones, even though it was the middle of summer. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but then I heard it, giggling, muffled whispers, the kind of sound children make when they're playing hide and seek, trying not to be found. My heart started racing. The sounds were coming from the hallway, in the direction of the guest room. I got out of bed, a shiver running down my entire body. As I approached the guest room, the whispers stopped, and silence fell over the house, like a suffocating weight. I was about to open the door when something inside me hesitated, but curiosity was stronger than fear. I slowly pushed the door open, the creaking of the hinges echoing like a scream in the silent house. There they were, all the dolls arranged in a neat row on the floor, facing the bed. I remember feeling my stomach turn. I was absolutely sure I had left them in the box, piled on top of each other. How had they gotten out? And who had arranged them in that creepy way? I looked around the room, every shadow seeming to move, as if hiding something. A strange smell, sweet and rancid at the same time, began to fill the air, a mixture that reminded me of wilting flowers and something rotten. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. I went back to my bed but left the hallway light on. Every creak of the house seemed amplified, every shadow elongated as if it had a life of its own. The dolls were on my mind, their hollow eyes watching me, that giggling echoing in my ears. I didn't know if I was going crazy, if it was just exhaustion, or if something was really happening. The next day, I decided I needed to get rid of those dolls. The discomfort I felt was simply unbearable. I took the box and, with a mix of relief and dread, carried it down to the basement. There, I left the box in the farthest corner, covered it with an old cloth, and went back upstairs, trying not to think about it anymore. That night, however, the real nightmare began. I woke up again at 3 in the morning, the same freezing cold in the air. But this time, it wasn't just giggling and whispers. There were footsteps, light footsteps like those of a child walking carefully. They were coming from the basement, slowly climbing the stairs, each step creaking under an invisible weight. My entire body was paralyzed with terror. I could hear clearly the sound of something getting closer. Then, a light scratching on my bedroom door. I have never felt such deep terror as I did in that moment. Something was on the other side of the door. I knew it. I could feel it. When I finally gathered the courage to look, there was nothing there, but the basement door was open. Panic took over me. How was that door open? I was absolutely sure I had locked it. Somehow, I gathered the strength to go down to the basement. The box was where I had left it, but the cloth covering it was on the floor, as if it had been ripped off. The dolls were all out of the box, scattered on the basement floor, their cold, vacant stares directed at me. I didn't think twice. I threw them all back into the box, carried it to my car's trunk, and drove to a distant field where I buried the box as deep as I could dig. I came back home at dawn, exhausted but feeling relieved, as if I had finally gotten rid of it. For a while, I thought everything was fine, but then, 2 weeks later, the terror returned. I woke up to the sound of giggling again. My heart sank in my chest. I ran to the basement and, to my horror, found a single doll sitting on the bottom step of the stairs, looking up in my direction. To this day, I don't know how that doll came back or if it was the same one I had buried. I can't explain it, and no one believes me when I tell this story. Since then, I can't sleep properly, afraid of hearing those light footsteps again, that scratching on the door. I sold the house a few weeks later, but the feeling of being watched never left me. Now, every time I pass by a garage sale and see porcelain dolls, I feel a chill that makes me cross the street. Some things should simply be left behind, untouched, forgotten. And the dolls from that box are definitely one of those things. It was an ordinary day. One of those when people look for cheap things at garage sales to decorate their homes or maybe find something rare. I was no different. I always liked visiting those sales, especially the ones in old neighborhoods. It was in one of those that I found the box. A small box, made of dark wood, almost black, with strange carvings that looked like runes. Something about it attracted me, a sort of morbid fascination that I couldn't understand. The seller was an old man with a dark, evasive look. When I asked about the box, he stared at me for a moment, as if deciding what to say. After a long silence, he murmured that the box had been in his family for generations, but that he wanted to get rid of it. He didn't give many details, and the price was surprisingly low. I didn't think twice and bought it, ignoring the silent warning in the old man's eyes, a look that I now recognize as fear. Fear of what I was taking with me. As soon as I got home, I put the box on the table and started examining it. The carvings were fascinating, small symbols, finely crafted, that seemed to form a hypnotic pattern. There was a small metal latch, which I opened with some difficulty. As soon as the lid lifted, an intense cold took over the room. The kind of cold that isn't natural, that doesn't come from outside, but seems to come from within you. At the same time, a strong smell of sulfur filled the air, making my stomach churn. Inside the box, there was only a small piece of paper. I carefully picked up the paper and saw that it had only one word written on it. Never. The letters were dark, made with ink that seemed thicker than usual, as if something had been mixed into it. A strange sense of discomfort came over me, but the cold and the smell disappeared as soon as I closed the box. I thought it was all just my imagination, the result of the gloomy weather that day and my restless mind always conjuring up things. That night, however, things started to get really strange. I was lying in bed, almost asleep, when I heard a sound. It was low, a murmur, a whisper coming from the other side of the room. I opened my eyes, and the first thing I saw was the box, which I had left on a shelf. I couldn't understand what the whisper was saying, but it filled the room like a distant echo. I got up, turned on the light, and the sound stopped instantly. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. With my heart pounding, I took the box and carried it to the basement. I placed it on a shelf and went back to my room, trying to push away the feeling of fear that was taking hold of me. I couldn't sleep. My mind was on high alert, expecting something I couldn't define. When I finally drifted off, I was awakened again by a sound. This time it was footsteps. Light footsteps, but constant, as if someone was walking upstairs. I got up, a shiver running down my spine. The footsteps stopped as soon as I turned on the light, and a sepulchral silence filled the house. I went to the basement, my mind torn between terror and curiosity. As soon as I opened the basement door, the smell of sulfur returned, stronger than before. The smell was so unbearable that my eyes started to water and my stomach turned. The box was open, even though I was sure I had closed it. I could swear I had locked that small latch, but now it was there, wide open, as if something had come out of it. The days that followed were hell. The smell of sulfur appeared in different spots of the house, sometimes in the kitchen, other times in the bedroom. Whispers continued to echo in the walls at night, and the shadows, once ordinary, seemed to move on their own. The worst was on the fourth night. I was in the living room, trying to distract myself by watching TV, when I felt something watching me. The air was heavy, hard to breathe, and then I noticed. The shadow next to the window wasn't there before. It was tall, disproportionate, a dark silhouette that shouldn't have been there. When I looked directly at it, I felt a sharp cold, and the shadow moved. It stretched along the wall until it disappeared, leaving behind that nauseating smell. Fear took over me. This was not my imagination. Something was in my house, something that I had brought by opening that box. The next day, I decided to seek help. I went to a nearby church, bringing the box with me. I talked to the priest, an old, calm man, and begged him to exorcise it, to do something that could rid me of it. When he looked at the box, his face went pale. He refused, saying that it should not be there, that I needed to leave and never come back. He looked at me with genuine fear, and that only increased the terror I felt. Not knowing what else to do, I went back home and, once again, went down to the basement. I placed the box in the farthest corner, covered it with a heavy blanket, and got out of there as quickly as possible. That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt the cold invade the house, the smell of sulfur growing stronger. At a certain point, I heard something coming up the basement stairs. The sound was slow, dragging, as if something heavy was climbing up step by step. The sound stopped at the basement door, and I knew there was something there. When I looked through the crack of my bedroom door, I saw a shadow projecting down the hallway, a grotesque silhouette that seemed to grow, to deform. I closed the door and sat there, on the floor, praying for it to go away. The next morning, I decided I could no longer stay in that house. I took the box and drove to a remote place, a forested area where no one usually goes. I dug a deep hole and buried the box there, trying not to think about what might be inside. When I covered the dirt, I felt a momentary relief, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For a few weeks, things seemed to go back to normal. The smell disappeared, and the whispers ceased. I started to believe that it was finally over, that I was free. But then, on a cold night, I was awakened again by a whisper. The sound wasn't coming from somewhere else in the house, but from beneath my bed. With my heart pounding wildly, I turned on the light and bent down to look. There was nothing there, but the whisper continued, now louder, as if it was coming directly from the floor. I knew that it wasn't over. Whatever had been in that box somehow was still with me. And since then, I have lived with this constant fear, knowing that something dark, something I accidentally released, still follows me. Something that should never have been touched. No matter where I go, there is always a chill in the house during the night. Sometimes I smell that sulfur, and I know that whatever came out of the box hasn't given up. It's there, always lurking, in the shadows, waiting for me to let my guard down. Some things are too dangerous to be discovered, and the mysterious box with the demon inside is definitely one of them. I have never touched anything from a garage sale again, and now I avoid even looking at anything that seems old or laden with history, because sometimes these stories don't just want to be remembered, they want to be continued through you. I've always enjoyed hunting for clothes at garage sales and thrift stores. There's something charming about old pieces, as if they carry fragments of stories that will never be told. It was on one of those days, at a garage sale in a neighborhood far from the city center, that I found a coat that seemed extremely old. It was made of thick wool, dyed a dark shade that resembled graphite. It was a bit worn, but had an undeniable style. The seller, a man with a tired look, told me that the coat had belonged to his grandfather and that no one in the family wanted to keep it. I found that a little strange, but I didn't ask any more questions. The first time I wore it, I noticed a strange smell. It was something like rot and sulfur, a suffocating odor that I couldn't quite place. I thought it was just the musty smell of the old fabric and decided I would wash it the next day. When I got home that night, the smell seemed to be all over me, on my hair, on my hands. I took a long shower trying to shake off the feeling. After that, I went to bed, believing that everything was fine. It was that first night that I started having nightmares. I dreamed of an old man with a sickly appearance, skin pale like wax, his eyes sunken and lifeless. He was standing by my bed, watching me while I slept. When I woke up, the room was dark and silent, but the feeling of the old man was still there, an invisible and suffocating presence, as if he had never left my side. On the second day, I decided to hang the coat in my wardrobe. I still liked it despite the smell. I thought that with a good wash, everything would be fine. However, that afternoon, I began to notice something different. The smell, which I thought was fading, seemed to have spread throughout the entire room. A strong and unpleasant aroma that, no matter what I did, would not disappear. It was as if the coat was alive, breathing, permeating the environment with that fetid odor. That night, I was woken up by the same nightmare again. The old man was closer this time. His bony hand was resting on my shoulder, his fingers cold, as if there was no life in them. When I opened my eyes, my breathing was fast, my body trembling uncontrollably. I turned to look around the room and noticed, to my horror, that the coat was no longer in the wardrobe. It was thrown on the floor, as if it had been violently pulled out and thrown there. I began questioning my own sanity. Had I taken the coat out and forgotten about it? Perhaps I was sleepwalking, or maybe it was all just a figment of my tired mind. I needed to believe that. I carefully folded the coat and put it back in the wardrobe, trying to ignore the smell that seemed more unbearable each time. On the third day, things got worse. I started hearing noises coming from the bedroom when I wasn't there. They were faint sounds, like something dragging across the floor. The smell of rot seemed to move through the house, always concentrating wherever the coat was. I felt like I was not alone. There was something there, something I couldn't see but knew was present. That afternoon, while I was in the living room, I caught a glimpse of a shadow passing by the bedroom door. It was quick, but enough to make my heart stop for an instant. I decided at that moment that I couldn't keep the coat any longer. I took it and threw it in the trash outside. When I came back inside, I felt a momentary sense of relief, as if I had rid myself of a great burden. But that night would be the worst of all. I woke up around 3 in the morning. My room was freezing, an unnatural cold that made my entire body ache. When I opened my eyes, there he was, the old man, standing at the foot of my bed. His sunken, lifeless eyes seemed to watch me with a silent fury. He didn't say anything, didn't move, just stood there, like a statue of dead flesh. His smell was even stronger, filling the air, making it impossible to breathe properly. I closed my eyes tightly, praying that it was just a nightmare, that when I opened them again, he would be gone. But the smell was still there, and I knew it was real. When I finally opened my eyes, the old man had disappeared. But as I turned to the side, my heart nearly stopped. The coat was there, neatly folded on the chair beside the bed, as if someone had carefully placed it there. I had no more doubts. Something was attached to that coat, something that did not want to leave. The next day, I drove as far away as I could and took the coat with me. It was an abandoned area, full of garbage and rubble, where I left the coat and walked away as fast as I could. I came home exhausted, mentally drained, but with a renewed hope that it was finally over. For a few weeks, the smell disappeared, and I no longer had nightmares. But one night, I was awakened again. The smell of sulfur was back, as strong as before, filling the room. My heart started racing, and a sense of panic took over me. I turned over slowly, afraid of what I might find. And there it was, the coat, hanging on my wardrobe door, as if it had never left. The old man never physically appeared again, but his presence was always there, embedded in that piece of clothing. Every night, I felt the smell getting stronger, the cold more intense, until I had to leave the house. I simply couldn't live there anymore, with the constant feeling that someone was watching me, that coat, or whatever was attached to it, would never leave me in peace. Since then, I've never bought clothes from garage sales or thrift stores again. The fear of bringing something back with me is unbearable. Some objects carry stories that should not be uncovered, stories that do not end when the owner is gone. The dead man's clothes were one of those stories. They did not want to be forgotten. They wanted a new owner, someone to share their burden, someone to drag into darkness with them. And I, by a careless mistake, almost became that person.